Ooh, welcome back, sickos, to another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on the Bite Size Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, John, joined by my co-host, Ben Parker of Sports and Money KC. Ben, how the heck are you?
I'm doing great, man. The football was fun. There's always a bunch to talk about this time of year, and the Tuesday giveth and giveth and giveth.
Yeah. Yeah, we can jump right into it. Tuesday blessed us with another piece of news to start the show with here, which might keep us from getting to some of these shitty games that we otherwise might end up talking
Darn it.
about. So, uh, this, yeah, right. This just happened. Um, I was just like I told you pre-show. I was just deep diving some stats that I wanted to have at hand for this show, and my dad actually texted me at like 7:58 and was just like Cousins benched. I was like, oh shit. So what is your initial take on that? Kind of based off his recent play, and then how does that feel to you, kind of framed within how you pictured this season going for Atlanta as well? Because this feels like a big turning point for them.
It's huge. It takes a lot of nerve to do something like this when you're the head coach and you're sitting right there still in the playoff hunt, right? I mean, this isn't late season who gives a crap. I mean, there's a lot on the line right here for you as a head coach and a franchise. It is a big turning point.
Yeah.
I'm biased. I got to say, I'm totally biased here because I was one of the very few back in the offseason who was cool with the Falcons drafting Penix. There weren't a lot, and I get it. I totally get it. I'm a big fan of drafting a quarterback you like whenever you see him, whenever you get the chance, because those chances just don't come up very often. Even if you've got a guy already in house, even if you just signed that guy 6 weeks ago, okay? I'm a big fan of, if there's a guy in the draft that you like and you don't usually get a shot at him, take him, because you just can't have enough good young quarterbacks, and we'll debate how good Penix is. So I'm already biased. I was not expecting it right now.
Yeah.
For them to do it right now, they're 7-7. They're sitting right here on the edge of being in and out of the playoffs, and I know Cousins has been horrible the past 5 weeks. Dreadful. Dreadful is the word. But I just didn't expect him to pull it off now, so I was surprised. I really was.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised too. And they've seen more of Penix than any of us have, right? They've seen him in practice. They've seen him taking reps right next to Cousins, so that it's a very direct comparison for them. But it's tough to imagine he doesn't still give you the best chance to win in this situation. Like how you mentioned, this isn't like, hey, let's boost morale on the back end of the season, see if we can't figure out who we are going into the offseason. This is, hey, we can still win this division. And you're coming off a really, really ugly win. You had an ugly blowout and an ugly close game for your Monday night doubleheader. And just that veteran presence, having seen everything he's seen from defenses, having been, part of a couple of playoff runs at this point, but just his experience, I think it's, it does take some nuts to sit that guy down at this point in the season when you're 500, 4 years, 180 mil. And I was pretty taken aback when they took Penix at 8. Like we were doing our big draft live stream on Bite Size, and all of us were just losing our fucking minds.
Everyone was shocked. I mean,
because
the internet broke
still, yeah, I think there still hadn't been a defender selected. They've had this anemic pass rush for years. You're like, man, Falcons are a Dallas Turner destination. Falcons are a Jared Verse destination. And it seemed like they ended up taking someone with the 8th overall pick who wasn't going to contribute to winning this season when everything else you were doing seemed to be for that purpose. Jesse Bates, later Justin Simmons. You trade for Judon, the Darnell Mooney contract. You bring Kirk Cousins in. And when they took him initially, it was like, okay, like I wouldn't have hated the pick if they hadn't made the Cousins move in free agency, just because, if you want to really load this roster up and build around a rookie, I think that makes a ton of sense. If you wanted to, similar to the Vikings, and not that Kirk Cousins in particular would have agreed to this, but if you grabbed a 1-year veteran bridge, 1 or 2-year veteran bridge, even with Penix coming off the injury, I think that is a lot more cogent of a thought process and kind of clicks with people a little bit more immediately. But we're seeing right now, especially if he performs well, the fruits of making that selection at that point, and what at the time seemed like over-investing in the quarterback position, which is a little oxymoronic with how much weight it carries in the game of football. But at the time, it seemed crazy. But now, especially if he does kind of save the season, sounds a little dramatic, but if he does sort of steer you back in the right direction, if he can make it to wide zone handoffs consistently, that might be enough to get you there and get you past the battered Bucs team who has who you have the tiebreaker on. You do. So you're a game back. You just got to get one back on them. Yeah, you swept them, and you think about just saying, yeah, you swept the Bucs. You immediately think about Kirk throwing for 500 in that Week 5 game.
Yes,
and it's like, oh man, that's like a really tough juxtaposition to consider when it's like we have the tiebreaker on the Bucs, we just need to gain a game back, and it's like, oh yeah, we sort of have the tiebreaker on the Bucs because of that insane overtime performance from Kirk early in the season, and that's when things were really humming. And it seems like he has to have sort of regressed a little bit, or not progressed in the way they thought he would through this point in the season. Goes 4 straight weeks without a touchdown. Gets one yesterday, but unable to convert third downs consistently, and really just bury a Desmond Ridder revenge game Raiders team. Like, that game should not have been close.
No, shouldn't have been close.
You hear about moral victories. I think that was a moral loss, and they decided they have to go with Penix if they're going to beat a serious team. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. It took me aback because I thought they would just ride him through the season and recalibrate in the offseason, and we would be having serious like QB battle conversations going into next year. But I don't know. Now I'm very, very excited to see how Penix looks.
Yeah, I am as well. Let me sit on Cousins here for just a second. He'd been playing horrible. We all knew it. That does make this decision a little easier for the coach, but it still takes a lot of nerve to do it, like you said. And I know you're putting Lee on stage here. Lee, welcome aboard as always, man. Really appreciate the support. He said, looks like they're selling out. Not good for Penix. So that's Lee coming in there. Cousins has been playing horrible. And a lot of that was due to the fact that two things. Number one, he's not very mobile this year. He is very, very limited in the pocket, which limits what he can do rolling out and scrambling for first downs. Also, the arm projection just isn't consistently there. Listen, there's throws on tape of him throwing 30, 40 yards to receivers, but it's not consistently being able to push the ball out there. A lot of his stuff is right over the middle, just right flat out over the middle. And that works against the Buccaneers, whose linebackers really struggle at coverage over the middle. But a lot of the defenses were starting to sit. We even saw some of the cornerbacks on some of the, say, 10-yard out routes starting to bait Cousins a little bit and starting to kind of cook him a little bit. So defenses were starting to cramp down, close in, and take away all the Kirk Cousins underneath stuff. And because he's not consistently able to launch 30, 40 yards downfield with good velocity and with good accuracy, you don't have that. And because he's not mobile, then you don't have the rollouts and the scrambles and the first down scrambles. So all of that is what's limiting here. And then they talked to you about it on last night's broadcast. the play action isn't working because the Falcons aren't doing a good job of blocking up the middle. So even play action is kind of limited. So this Falcons offense in the past few weeks has gotten really limited really quickly because Cousins isn't totally his old self and because defenses have figured that out. And it's been a real problem here for Atlanta over the past few weeks.
Yeah, and you think about you think about what Kevin O'Connell did for Kirk Cousins, coming over from working under Sean McVay, really had him playing more aggressively than he had in the past. And, there was this hyper conservatism to Kirk, where like all quarterbacks should, he really prioritized taking care of the football and not turning it over. But that contributed to a lot of drives stalling out. There were a lot of 3-and-outs with Kirk, particularly under Zimmer. And especially when Zimmer was firing any OC who wasn't running on first down, like you were getting into precarious passing situations for Kirk, and that hyper conservatism kind of came out. Kevin O'Connell got there and really unlocked kind of that ability to toe the line between aggressive enough and too aggressive for Kirk as a quarterback. And then you transplant him to Atlanta. You've got Zach Robinson calling offensive plays there now, also coming from working under Sean McVay. It seemed like a really good match. And this is a perfect question from Lee here, kind of what I was just speaking to. Don't you think scheme for their offense is stale? I think it has to be because of Kirk Cousins. One of Kirk Cousins' superpowers pre-Achilles injury was the play action, under center play action rollouts, particularly to his left as a right-handed quarterback. And they haven't been able to utilize that. And these are staple things. McVay's gotten away from some of it as he's sort of had to adapt, and defensive coordinators have caught on to his fastball. So he's had to adapt, but Zach Robinson comes over, and you'd think McVay guy calling shots, Kirk Cousins, this is going to be a lot of under center play action, a really strong run game, because that play action is also going to protect your offensive line from true pass block sets, which is a department in which they struggle. It's a good run blocking unit. Not a lot of great one-on-one pass protectors. And that can sort of hide that. But they've had to essentially, if they're going to run any play action, it has to be out of pistol because Kirk can't cover that ground. He can't really even get to the depth he needs to make a good fake and roll out to his left. He's not as strong on the move. And there was this thing around that Achilles injury for Cousins where, there were a lot of folks of the opinion, well, he never relied on his athleticism. So if his athleticism is a little zapped by this injury, it won't change much about how he plays as a quarterback. Without considering that if you have a quarterback who's not extremely athletic to begin with, but gets by, it might hurt him even more to have what little athleticism he has sapped from him by an Achilles injury. And that's what we're seeing. He now doesn't even have the athleticism to get the handoff to Bijan Robinson. There were 4 plays last night where he was either trying to get a handoff to Bijan or just trying to reset the pocket or rescue the pocket, where he kind of started to try to get to top. There were a lot of plays on which it looked like he was running away from someone in a dream. You know how that feeling is where
yes,
you're running in a dream, but you can't go as fast. That was his entire game yesterday. You're trying to punch the guy and nothing's really connecting. It's like his body just wasn't listening to what his brain wanted to do. And honestly, it sucks to watch. As a guy who, was pretty middle of the road on Kirk Cousins. He was very divisive for the Vikings fan base, but I never wished ill on him. And it's sad to see a guy who was a really solid quarterback for a long time, just kind of have no juice left. And if Penix can at least unlock that play action game, if he can create off script even a little bit, because he's not a particularly mobile quarterback, also coming off some lower leg injuries,
Right.
but he's 10 years younger, a little bit faster to begin with. So I think Penix will kind of, to Lee's question, to round that out, I think the insertion of Penix will actually kind of unlock a lot of other things Zach Robinson has probably wanted to do all season. And they haven't been able to really do much at all under center, just because of the ground Kirk has to cover that he really can't anymore. And like to your point about even the passes he's thrown, he's still very accurate. And he still knows where the windows are going to be, but they are dying on him, these balls, even the ones over the middle. You know, if his guys aren't creating separation, he isn't really able to thread the needle anymore and put the juice on it he needs to fit it into these tight windows. And it's a hindrance to this point in the offense. He was the smartest when it came to making money. No, he is not washed in that capacity, Lee. He is still firing on all cylinders, raking it in. But yeah, I don't know, man. I can't wait to see what Penix does, and I can't wait to see the structure of this offense with Penix, because I think it'll be pretty starkly different. Because I think there's, a few pages of the playbook that have just not been able to be turned to this point in the season. So I think it'll unlock some things for Zach Robinson in the offense. I think you might see an uptick in offensive production. You might also see, well, it's tough to have an uptick in turnovers or mistakes, but you might see him, missing certain progressions maybe Kirk would get to. But I think it'll balance out with his, a little bit more ability to create off schedule. And he's also not going to be hindering your wide zone running game by just not being able to get there. So I don't know. Yep. We'll see what happens there. There's another quick thing I have been itching to talk to you about, and that is one of my golden Minnesota Golden Gopher legend, DeVondre Campbell, who had already soured some Gopher fandom by playing for the Packers for as long as he did, but now we had a pretty unprecedented move from DeVondre Campbell. And if you guys don't know about this show or have never seen it or don't know these personalities, go watch the O-Line Committee. It's a podcast that former NFL offensive lineman Alex Boone and Jeremiah Searles do with a Vikings podcaster. It's called O-Line Committee. And if you know anything about Alex Boone, he was on those Harbaugh Niners back in the day, and then the Vikings for a short time as well. He was on the 17 team, and his take on it is hilarious. He's a pretty no-nonsense guy, but he said that if DeVondre did this on the 2012 Niners, they don't think he would have made it out of the locker room without multiple guys fighting him. Patrick Willis, Dante Whitner, guys like this. And that was really funny to me. But I mean, you even saw postgame. For those who don't know, I didn't even say what happened. He decided not to go into the game when he was asked to. This was Dre Greenlaw's first game back, and he was really good. His first game back really definitely warranted the start. He was the longtime starter before they brought DeVondre Campbell in to be a stopgap starter after his injury. And he was asked to go in the game, said no, and then didn't go into the game. George Kittle sounded off on this. He hopes he's never around a player who decides to do this again, were his words.
Yeah.
And the Niners are going to, as opposed to releasing him, he's a vested veteran, so he would still get paid were he to be released. They are suspending him 3 games, so he's not able to go join another team, and kind of is fully punished for this. What was your first reaction when you heard about this, and what of like the fallout from it has been particularly interesting to you?
We just don't normally see teammates go after another teammate in public like this. It's pretty unusual, but a lot of the 49ers guys were very clear on how completely unhappy and unamused they were by all of that, and rightfully so. My first instinct was the normal, hey, it's selfish, it hurts the team, but my real first take on it was this hurts DeVondre Campbell. Listen, we all get in a spot where our feelings are hurt, where we feel like we deserve more than we're getting, where we feel like somebody else is getting something that belongs to us, where we feel like we're being stepped over, pushed aside, ignored, overlooked, underestimated, you name it. We all feel that way. But we don't do stupid stuff as a result, hopefully. We just keep fighting, pushing, working, improving, dealing with life. And here Campbell is hurting himself. His teammates don't want to play with him anymore. His coaches don't want to coach him anymore. His fans don't want him around anymore. Well, maybe he latches on to another team, but a lot of teams aren't going to want to touch him at this point. A lot of players around the league aren't going to want to touch him. And he's going to hurt his own pay. You know, who's going to want to pay him top dollar now? You know, so he's only hurting his own self. Listen, he'd been the leading tackler on the team this year. He'd done a pretty good job. I get it. You know, he'd been contributing. But you're not the best player for that spot, man. Get over yourself. Come off the bench. Show these 49ers people that, hey, I'm the guy when you call on me, and I'm going to, you know, punch somebody's lights out on the field, right? And he didn't do that. He's really hurting himself here. Beyond all the obvious stuff, he is hurting himself here, man. I know you can't help how you feel sometimes. You know, you just feel a certain way. I get it. But, you know, don't do stupid stuff and hurt yourself.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I mean, this is a guy who got a 5-year, $50 million deal from Green Bay just a few years back. And coming into this situation, like, hey, DeVondre, what did you think was going on here? They didn't call up a practice squad player and just start him over you. This was half of the very best linebacker duo in the league last year up until the Super Bowl. Freak accident. He was so fucking excited to run on the field, he blew his leg out. just jumping on the sideline to go out there. You should know the status quo within this organization by now. And if they weren't transparent with you about, hey, when Greenlaw gets back, he's our guy, you know, you'll still be out there in base, you know, as the third linebacker. But when we go to nickel, these are our 2 guys. Mm-hmm. If they weren't transparent about that, sure. But how about you just read between the lines a tiny bit and realize that, yeah, this is not I'm not just going to usurp the role from a guy who's been injured since before I got here. You know, I didn't win this job in camp and get benched.
Right.
I don't know. It's tough to think he didn't see that coming. Like, oh, Dre's off IR. He's our starting line. Like, there you go. I just can't. I can't believe the thought process there. To feel like you were slighted is insane. It's insane because you weren't. This is just the situation.
No, you weren't slighted.
You know, you weren't slighted. So I don't know. It's tough. And yeah, like there's the Vontae Davis thing. There's the Antonio Brown thing. But those guys were just done playing football. They weren't, you know, just not playing that game and thinking they were going to weasel off the roster. Those guys were just like, I'm hanging it up. Like, completely different thing. So, I don't know. But anyway, we should talk about some things slightly more positive. The couple things I want to get to throughout the rest of the show are the NFC West race. Just one of those teams will get in more than likely between the Rams and the Seahawks. And, functionally, the Niners were kind of knocked out by that loss. They're not mathematically eliminated, but tough hill to climb for them. So it's kind of Seahawks, Rams. We're also going to talk about the one seed race in the NFC. And we're going to talk a little bit about the MVP race as well. Mostly between Lamar and Josh Allen for my money, but stick around for that. Let's jump into the NFC West race. And if you're in the chat, drop in the comments who you think pulls this off between the Rams and the Seahawks. Remaining schedules for the two teams, the Rams are at the Jets, then they host Arizona, and then they host Seattle. Arizona still feisty at 7-7. So we could see there, but both the Rams and the Seahawks control their own destiny at this point, and they both match up, of course, in Week 18. The Seahawks host Minnesota this week, then they go to Chicago, and then they're at the Rams Week 18. Drop in the comments below your NFC West champion pick there, and like and subscribe if you haven't already. But Ben, I've got a bunch of stats on these teams I can dump on you, but vibes-wise, gut feeling, trust barometer for these two teams, who do you trust more if they get in to actually make some noise? And kind of wrapped into that, who do you think, based on remaining schedule and how they've played, does come out on top in the NFC West here?
I'll be real quick because I want to hear all these stats you got on these teams here. Playoff time, I trust the Rams by a long shot to do more damage. It's not even close for me. McVay, obviously brilliant, one of the top 4 coaches in the league for me. Stafford, fantastic quarterback, even though he's not what he used to be. He's still fantastic. And then you got the 2 receivers finally healthy. They're dangerous, man. Every play. But if it came down to winning the division, I still think it's fairly close. Seattle has continued to kind of reinvent itself on defense a little bit the past 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. They've changed some of what they're doing on offense the past month as well. They're willing to make adjustments, and they are winning. That is important. So both teams still have some major flaws, major flaws on both teams that will hinder them. The division race is going to be very close to me. I think nip tuck, but come playoff time, give me the Rams by a long shot.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. You've also got more between McVay and Chris Shula as opposed to Grubb and McDonald. You've got more experience there from a play calling standpoint for the Rams. So playoff time, I think you're right. I also think with the way the Rams offensive line has played compared to Seattle's, I think if you take offensive line out of it, I think firepower is pretty similar for those two teams. And you just talk about the quarterbacks and the skill positions, because Geno does not suck. Don't let Twitter misguide you about your Geno Smith opinions. He's very good. And I think you were able to see how good Geno is once they had to plop Sam Howell behind this offensive line and see what he was able to do.
The Howell thing is tough to watch.
The Howell thing was the worst completion percentage over expected since Sam Howell in Week 16 of 2022. You have no time with Seattle here, but Seattle's defense is starting to come on. They've gotten healthy. Byron Murphy and the edge group, Boye Mafe, Skyuma, Go Gophers, starting to come along. The secondary, Tariq Woolen's really up and down, but Devon Witherspoon and Julian Love have been really, really good. You finally got a competent off-ball linebacker like McDonald went and got not him, but for his defense, they went and got Roquan Smith. In Baltimore, you go get Ernest Jones. Suddenly, this is like a competent unit defending passes over the middle. But both teams really, really struggle on third down. And it's because with Seattle's O-line, it's really tough in true passing downs to hold up. On third and long, Seattle's 21st in EPA per play. Third down overall, they're 14th. So when they get, some short yardage situations, they're able to punch it through. But they don't rely on this run game very often at all. This is the 5th highest pass rate in the league. And this is the 3rd lowest play action rate in the league, Seattle. So you're not, kind of like we talked about with Atlanta, you're not helping kind of cushion that offensive line with some play action shots. You're not helping Geno, get big drops and let things develop downfield without having to be in true pass sets for this offensive line, which has had its struggles, especially when Abe Lucas was still out and the way that interiors looked. But then you look at the Rams, and they have similar struggles, but McVay seems to have more answers and more crutches for them in those situations. They run the 6th highest percentage of play action. Their pass rate's more kind of in the middle, about 57%, kind of middle of the pack in the league, 17th. Seattle passes it over 63% of the time. And then you look at the run game, and Seattle, in theory, should be a strong running team as well, but the Rams really punch you in the mouth on the ground. Not a lot of explosives for the Rams at all. But they're 7th in rushing success rate on the season. They're 23rd in EPA per rush on third down. So when they get into predictable run downs, it's a little tough. But this is a team that'll, get 1 on first down and run it again on 2nd and 9 and get 6 or 7, get into a 3rd and manageable. They're and rushing success rate as opposed to like EPA per play kind of stuff. Rushing success rate's based on the down and distance. So on 1st and 2nd down, it's a successful play per that metric if you get half of the yardage required to get a first down. 1st and 10, you get 5 yards, success. 2nd and 5, you get 3 yards, success. 3rd and 4th down, it's a successful play if you convert or not, regardless of the distance to go. So when you think about it that way, it's a very consistent run game, 7th in success rate, but 23rd in overall EPA per play because they're not generating explosives. They are just getting their 4, 5, 6 yards in a cloud of dust and doing it over and over again, and then going to the play action. And then when they have to go and spread you out, they get into that shootout. They'll go gun, they'll go empty, and they'll go nuts like we talked about last week with those 4x1 formations and all the crazy shit they're able to do out of that. So it allows McVay to kind of reach deeper into the bag when you've got that kind of foundation that Seattle just doesn't really seem to have yet. And a lot of it's just Geno hero ball. And it's something that's really tough to sustain. As much as I like Geno, as much as he's really willing to uncork it, it's tough there. But from a yards before contact standpoint, it feels like Seattle should be better. Seattle's 2nd in the league in yards before contact on third down. So when they really need it, that offensive line gets a really good push. In that metric, Rams are 18th, again, kind of middling. But then rush yards over expected, the Rams are 31st. So you get hands-on guys or you win on the whiteboard. There's not a lot of dynamism to that run game. The Seahawks, on the other hand, are 11th in rush yards over expected. So really dynamic guys like Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are going to make plays in the open field, make guys miss, and get those extra yards. So, just a lot of random anecdotal kind of stuff. But these are little things like you kind of have to look for when you're really starting to split hairs, because I think these teams are pretty comparable. And it's interesting to kind of see the DNA of these play callers through these kind of metrics with Seattle. But, I favor the Seattle defense a little bit, but the Rams are 5th in pressure rate so far this season, actually. Seahawks are 13th.
Yeah.
Seahawks a little bit stronger against the run, but the Rams hodgepodge defense is kind of really coming together. Michael Hoyt, top 5 player in the league. Kobe Turner has been awesome. Jared Verse, of course. Byron Young. You're getting good play out of Quentin Lake. Cam Curl's been solid. So the things are kind of coming together for both defenses. They're both kind of getting hot at the right time. I just really hope it comes down to week 18, and it's pretty unlikely that it won't. But because Rams have the tiebreaker right now. They had that Demarcus Robinson overtime go ball to win it, 26-20 last time they met. That was a really fun game. And I'd like for Seattle to either have a game lead or for them to be dead even, where they can win the division outright or the Rams take it. I'd like all the marbles to be on the table in week 18. Again, Rams are at the Jets, then they host Arizona leading up to that game. Seahawks have to host Minnesota this week and then go to Soldier Field, to face a cornered animal of a team in Chicago who might just get rabid on you and actually pull a win out. But I don't know. I do want to see it come down to week 18 one way or the other, though. And I think I like the Rams in that matchup by a hair. Not that the Seahawks can't put a good game plan together and beat you, but I think you lean on the experience of McVay and Stafford in that situation, and let alone the experience of Kupp and Higbee in that offensive line. Just a more battle-tested group than Seattle on the offensive side at this point. And I don't know, if Leonard Williams keeps playing like a defensive player of the year like he had for the month of November, I said it could really go either way, but I think that's going to be a really, really good game. And I hope all the cards are on the table. Next, before we talk MVP, a little bit on the negative side. Bills-Lions shootout. This is a lot of people's Super Bowl matchup. These teams probably have the best odds to win their respective conferences. I haven't looked at the Vegas odds, but I bet you they're top 1 or 2 in their respective conferences. What was it, 48-42, Bills over Lions?
Yes.
Which defense concerns you more going forward for these teams as they go to navigate their respective conferences for these playoff runs? Because the Lions, of course, control their own destiny for the 1 seed, tied with Minnesota right now. If they win out, the division's theirs. If Minnesota wins out, the division's theirs. But they control their destiny there. Bills aren't really going to be able to get that 1 seed with the lead KC has right now, or at least it's unlikely, but they do have the tiebreaker if they knot it up. But even if they don't get a bye and these teams have to play 3 times to get to the Super Bowl, which of these defenses concerns you more? We've got a lot of injuries on the one side, and we've got just kind of a middling group on the other side that's well coached. But Bills or Lions, which defense would concern you more on a potential Super Bowl run?
I'm curious to see where you go with this, but I love this question because I've already been thinking about these defenses over on some of my other shows. We've done a lot of work on just generic defenses, not specific XO, but just generic who's good, who's not. And I've been thinking about Bills and Lions a lot this year on the defensive side of the football. For me, it's the Bills. The Bills defense worries me more. I attribute most, not all, most of the Lions' failures on defense to the injuries. And we know they won't be fully healthy come playoff and Super Bowl time, but you got to assume they're going to get some of these people back and have a much more consistent defense this year like we've kind of seen. It's not a top 8 defense. It's not even close. But when healthy, it's a good, solid defense. The Bills' defense worries me, though, because they've been banged up some, too, nowhere near as much as the Lions. But even when healthy, this Bills' defense is so unbelievably predictable. It has got to be, and I don't know who else I would put up there with it, but it has got to be one of the most predictable defenses in the whole league. You always basically know, and again, you mentioned that they're well coached and well taught, so that's why it works. But they're just so unbelievable. They're going to rush 4. They're going to drop into a shell. They're going to play a ton of zone. They don't usually run a whole lot of man unless they really feel like they need to. It's just vanilla. And again, they're well taught. They're well techniqued and stuff like that. But everybody in the building knows what they're going to do. You can hear announcers talk about it. You can hear Belichick and Manning talk about it. You know, all the opposing offensive coordinators know exactly what they're going to do. And since you don't have a lot of dominant players on that side of the football, that's a problem because they're not going to overwhelm you. They're not going to smother you. So then you either need to pick it up in terms of blitz scheme or in terms of confusing coverage scheme. And they don't really do a whole lot of either one of those. It's just predictable, solid, well-taught defense, and that's it. So again, when you have the Bills, I know they've got the great offense. When you're going through this AFC playoffs and you're lined up against Lamar, or you're lined up against Patrick, or you're lined up against, whoever, to me, that's a real problem. The Lions defense worries me too, but it's the Bills because of that predictability factor.
Yeah, I like where you went with that too, because you're right. I mean, this has been a cover 2 defense for 5-6 years, from Frazier to McDermott, with play calling duties. And what's interesting too is because a lot of zone coverage in this day and age is still match coverage. So it's still zone principles, but after the snap, it turns into man coverage because of the way assignments work out. It
has to
zone match, exactly. But the Bills, I've got to think more than any team in the league. I've only watched 2 games of theirs actually on film. I've seen a lot, of course, on the broadcast angle, but I watched this one back and I've seen another. And it seems like they actually just spot drop to zones a lot. You'd call that country cover 2 or country cover 3, which is essentially just you're dropping to your bubble on the whiteboard. You're covering grass and then getting zone eyes on the quarterback from there, as opposed to matching the numbered receivers outside to in and kind of deducing your assignment from there based on your zone principles. They're literally sometimes just drop it into Tampa 2 and seeing if people find the windows or whatever. And they're able to get away with some things like that because of guys like Teron Johnson, who play that star position in the nickel or the overhang, who can freestyle a little bit with his veteran savvy. And, the way he keys on quarterbacks, you see him he jumps off the screen every time you watch this defense. And they do have a pretty strong pass rush collectively, especially if they can turn it on. We talked a little bit about this last week, but Greg Rousseau has been really good. Ed Oliver wrecked shop against the Lions on Sunday. And then AJ Epineza, Von Miller in passing downs. You get Von Miller on another playoff run. He could hide some of those coverage concerns. But I think I'm more concerned about Detroit overall right now. We got news yesterday. Aleem McNeil and Carlton Davis are likely out for the season. On the other side, David Montgomery is actually going to undergo season-ending knee surgery. But I think with Detroit, injuries hurt them more because I think for Aaron Glenn, it takes away his fastball. I think when you don't have a guy like Carlton Davis on the outside, one of the best press man corners in the league, wants to punch you in the mouth, wants to kick your ass at the line of scrimmage and be in your jersey up and down the field. When you take a guy like that away and suddenly you're relying on a couple rookies in Terry and Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw, to do that with, and without drawing a ton of penalties, I think you're going to steer away from some of the man coverage that Glenn's leaned into this season. And that really is kind of the fastball. They've had to get more creative with pressures with all the injuries along the front. And I mean, we're going to see like, I never remember his first name, but Colin O'Connor or something like that is going to be rushing the A and B gaps. You're going to have Zadarius Smith, sure. But I don't think that you're able to kind of like make up for the back end concerns with your pass rush the way the Bills might be able to, even without having to blitz and deviate there. Like I think with your 4-man rush in Buffalo, I think there's some matchups you can really cause some problems in. But with Detroit, it's kind of the other way. It's kind of top down where you're thinking, man, we're really going to need a whale of a game out of Branch and Joseph and Terry and Arnold if we're going to get away with this. We're really going to need a lights out performance from Jack Campbell because this pass rush isn't going to get home. And I think that's a really that's a much tougher place to be when the quarterback's going to have time. And if you get in a matchup with a Jalen Hurts, if you get in a matchup with a Kyler Murray, if he sneaks in, or I guess there's not that many mobile quarterbacks in the NFC. But if you get into a matchup with a mobile quarterback and you try to play 2-man like you really want to, or you try to play cover 1 like you really want to, and that pass rush isn't going to get home, that's scramble city. Nobody's going to have eyes on the quarterback. And, even if your coverage is sticky, you're probably going to break contain against a shifty quarterback. We've seen Sam Darnold punish that at times. So I think that's a much tougher cross to bear for the Lions than it is for Buffalo. But neither one is a convincing unit right now that you'd put money on, as far as like neither matches up well with any of the best teams in their conference. So that is a tough one to sort out. Let's beat the buzzer with this one. Now, I will, and honestly, to that point too, the Bills have been consistent all year. They're 17th overall in EPA per play allowed on defense. Middle of the pack, probably outperforming your talent by just a smidge, particularly on the back end and the injuries you've weathered. Detroit, still 6th in overall EPA per play allowed on the season, despite a couple stinkers. We'll probably see that fall off further, but still. For this MVP race, I think it's kind of narrowed down to these two guys. If Joe Burrow's team wasn't 6-8, I think he'd have his hat in the ring.
Right.
But because in a vacuum, that might be the best quarterback performance we've seen this season. I think there's an argument for it. But these two guys have been lights out. Really quick. Passing yards. Lamar's got 35.80. Josh has 33.95. Completion percentage, Lamar's at 68.1, 64.4 for Josh. Passing touchdowns for Lamar, 34 to go with 3 rushing touchdowns. That's 37 total, 3 picks. Josh, 25 passing touchdowns, 12 rushing touchdowns, just because sometimes it seems like he wants to 5 picks. So 37-3, 37-5. Completion percentage over expected. Lamar 18th at plus 0.6. Josh is 21st at minus 0.3%. EPA per dropback. Lamar 0.30. Josh 0.25. Pressure to sack ratio, which is just how often the defense converts a pressure into a sack against you. Lamar's actually at 14.1 while Josh is down at 8.7. So Josh actually has done a better job rescuing pockets against pressure and avoiding sacks. Yards per attempt. Lamar's first in the league at 8.9. Josh right behind him at 8.0. This is the one that I feel these final two stats are what I feel leans most in Josh Allen's favor when you assess what he's had to do for this offense. Percentage of throws into a tight window, Lamar is 34th among qualified quarterbacks. Just 9.9% of his throws have been into tight windows. He's being helped by scheme, being helped by his separators, also being helped by a play action rate of 26%. Josh's play action rate to this point in the season, 18.9%, and his throws into tight windows are at a 15% rate. So much more often he's had to throw into tight windows and make those plays. Think about the back shoulders he's had to just wing in there to Keon Coleman at times. Some of the throws he's made to Amari Cooper since they acquired him. Much less easy sort of gimmies for Josh to kind of get him into rhythm, which is probably why you see the discrepancy in completion percentage, right? But actually, really quick, I said this to Ben pre-show. I forgot I didn't say it on the show. Number 1 and 2 in tight window percentage throws are Dak and Cooper Rush. I said Josh is at 15%. Both those guys are over 20% tight window throws, and that is just a product of the Dallas offense to this point in the season. They have one receiver who can separate. They don't use any motion. They don't do anything to insulate their quarterback at all. I just thought that was funny. Doesn't matter who's in there. Everything's on their shoulders. But those are the two things for me that I think kind of lean Josh, because Lamar's been hyper efficient. But if you had to pick one of these guys you think has been most valuable to his team and to his situation, are you going Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson?
When you phrase it that way, most valuable to his team, his position, I'm going to go Josh Allen. That's where I'm going to lean. I think it's very close. I really do. I would be totally fine if either guy got this award. Lamar was tearing it up for the first, 8, 9 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that, was just crushing it. But then he's had a few disappearing acts, and Lamar does that. And that bothers me, the disappearing acts. I want to see greatness be consistent. And, Josh Allen has not quite been as flashy, especially the first half of the year. But, boy, it's like he's just been consistent and more efficient and then better and more explosive as the year has gone along. And Josh Allen is really crescendoing, if you will. So I would favor Allen by a hair here for this award. To me, it's wide open. I'd be fine if either guy got it.
Yeah, and I agree. Josh, really the only – I think was it against Houston? Was it that game they weirdly – choked away against Houston when they didn't run clock down out of their own end zone? They threw it 3 times, didn't salt any clock away, gave it back to Houston, lost by 3. He was 9 for 31 in that game. That's the only real stinker for Josh. But that was before you got Cooper. I think Shakir was out for that game as well. That's when you saw a lot of those tight window back shoulders to Keon. There were 3 unreal throws he made to Keon. One of which went off his shoulder pads. But I think I'd lean Josh too, just by a hair. And I don't think voter fatigue is or should play a factor. But I'd love to see Josh get one. If Lamar gets one, it'll be his third. He'll be tied for third in career MVPs, tied with Tom Brady, tied with Johnny Unitas. With 3 MVPs, the only 2 guys who have more are Peyton with 5 and Aaron Rodgers with 4. So that's no reason to say he shouldn't win it because, maybe you don't feel like that's the company in which he belongs, which probably isn't the case anyway. He probably does. If we're able to remove ourselves from the present and just look back on his career the way we look back on everyone else's. But I'd love to see Josh get one. And I think this is as good a time as any. It hasn't been a nuclear year for Mahomes finally. And now it's a big year for Josh. I think he's carrying more weight for this offense than Lamar is for his, just by a hair. Don't get me wrong. The Ravens are 67-24 when Lamar starts since he got there. That's tough to compete with. It might be 57-24. I might have gotten a little dyslexic on that, but however many games he's started, they have 24 losses. But Josh, I think you're right. I think Josh is the rising tide that's lifted all Buffalo boats to this point in the season.
Yeah.
When Lamar, I think is captaining the ship as well as anybody could, but I think he is slightly more insulated in that offense. I think what Todd Monken does to get receivers separated, to get open looks, to keep them on schedule with bubbles to Zay Flowers, and now you're seeing some really big production from Rashad Bateman as they're starting to use him as a deep threat. Mark Andrews got his head out of the sand finally, and then Derrick Henry was in the MVP conversation until a few weeks ago. James Cook's had some really great runs. He tugged a dread out of a guy's hand on the way to a 41-yard touchdown on Sunday. He's been great. That running back trio has been interesting. But I think Lamar's just getting more help, and that's not anything he can help. That's not his fault. I just think when you isolate these performances and you consider the complementary pieces, it's really tough for me to say it's anybody but Josh Allen right now. And again, we're splitting hairs a little bit, but you've got to at this point. Both guys are playing out of their fucking minds. So you end up having to pick one, But this is a better Lamar season than any of his MVP seasons. That's what's really tough.
It absolutely is. You mentioned real quick on the completion percentage for quarterbacks. I've gotten to where, and this has happened over the past, say, 5 to 7 years, if your completion percentage is, say, higher than about 66, somewhere in there, I'm going to be real suspicious that you're getting a lot of easy throws, screens, and stuff. Now, if it's below, say, 62, I'm going to suspect that you're just not throwing the football very well or you're making bad decisions. But anytime you're in between that 62 to 66 window, I'm going to assume you're pretty good, and you're also trying to challenge defenses downfield some. So even though I think he's one of those quarterbacks had the lower completion percentage, that might actually speak a little more favorably to me because it generally, not always, generally means you're trying to push the ball more consistently downfield or into tighter windows, one or the other. So, just something to keep an eye on when you're looking at generic quarterback percentages. Getting away from this conversation a little bit here with Josh and Lamar, just that wide open quarterback thing. It's just there's so many easy throws available out there these days that defenses are willing to give you. Maybe not yards, but throws and completions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that applies to like the Jaden Daniels versus Caleb Williams discussions we've had this season too. Like Cliff Kingsbury has put Jaden in much better positions than Thomas Brown or Waldron had put Caleb in. And actually, I don't know who the hell is technically OC, is the nominal OC for the Bears anymore. Than Thomas Brown is head coach, but I think that applies there too. And that's exactly what I think we see, that, there's a 3.7% discrepancy between Lamar's completion percentage and Josh's. Lamar's 3.7% higher. And Josh, tight window throw percentage is 5.1% higher. So I think that's a direct correlation there. And I think you're seeing, exactly, just some more risky push the ball downfield throws from Josh. Not that Lamar's not doing that. Just the degree to which Josh is just unbelievable. And both of them have been great. So, all right, we planted our flag on Josh Allen. Let's see how the next few weeks go. We'll revisit that probably briefly over the next couple of weeks, but thank you so much for sticking around with us. Drop a like on the video on your way out. Lee's saying something I might like. Lions somehow lose division. They probably lose in the wild card round to Tampa. Let's go. Vikes 1 seed, first round bye, manifest it, control. Yeah, literally. And if the Vikes win out, they do have the 1 seed. They have opponent strength tiebreaker over Philly right now, and they'd have won the division outright over Detroit if they win out, with one of those wins being over Detroit, of course. So in the driver's seat for the 1 seed. Let's go Vikes. In the meantime, guys, you can check out Supersize Sports right here on Bite Size Sports on Thursday, as well as ADP, Another Damn Fantasy Podcast on Wednesday nights here on the channel. And Ben, I know you've got some stuff going on Sports and Money KC. Anywhere else you'll be found in coming weeks? I know you're working on some stuff with Simon as well, but let the people know.
I'm on 4 or 5 different shows right now, but the one I really want to promote is back on Sports and Money KC. Just last week, I did a video, 11 ways that Sean Payton is helping Bo Nix. We did a little bit of a diagram there. The first 5 points are just kind of environmental, but by the point 6, we're into some actual technique and diagram stuff. So go check it out. Sports and Money KC, 11 ways that Sean Payton is helping out Bo Nix.
Love it. I am a sucker for football minutia. I'll have to check that out myself as well. For me, I'll be here every Tuesday, of course. Ben and I also have some interesting stuff in the works, kind of on the horizon next couple months here. If we haven't talked about your shitty team, we will be soon. We're going to be talking off-season plans for teams that have been eliminated, and we'll try to get to as many as we can throughout the end of the season and into the off season. And we probably won't get to all 32 because there's going to be a lot of them that are in a pretty good spot by the time we get through January. But we'll talk about a lot of those teams and see if we can put our heads together a little bit and get them on the right track. And then all of my written work, if you like anything I have to say and you want a little bit of the, if you're old school, want a little bit of the written word, you can check out zonecoverage.com, where I cover the Vikings anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week. I just had a big piece come out about the defensive front 7 for the Vikings. I charted snap counts and got into a lot of the different ways that Flores deploys these guys. With their different skill sets, the different fronts he uses on certain downs and distances and kind of tendencies and how that's driven defensive success for the Vikings to this point in the season. And what we'll be publishing probably Thursday is a love letter to Josh Metellus, who is an unbelievable football player. If you're not privy to it yet, check out my Twitter at JohnBBoyd12. I've got a whole thread of Josh Metellus run fit clips. I didn't anticipate the whole piece just being Josh Metellus run fits, but here we are. But check that out there. I'll have all kinds of game clips going on there, live tweets, all that kind of stuff. And that piece should be live Thursday. So check it out. I really appreciate it. And leave a like on your way out. Leave a posthumous comment once I end this stream. If you feel so inclined, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible, just a benchmark for us. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week, guys, right here on Bite Size Sports. And everybody hold very still so they don't know I haven't ended the stream yet.